Suffice to say, it was an interesting market reaction to the news that MULN Automotive had now received EPA certification for its vehicles. Hi again, everyone. I hope you're all doing really well. So the week kicked off in interesting fashion, and following on from what we were talking about just before Monday's trade, MULN does come out with the news that they did indeed receive EPA certification, and that sort of gets backdated to the 22nd of September. So those secondhand channels that I've been listening to, I guess kind of came through, and it looks like the EPA approval was there. It's great news. So what this means is that the MULN Class 3 chassis truck can now start being delivered to its customers, and we know that there's about $80 million in orders that the company's going to start to fulfill. So that's all great news. Wasn't quite the market reaction that I was expecting, to say the least. So there was an initial pop, but then the stock kind of followed its usual trend of going down. I think we were down by about 6% at one point on the day. However, if you look at what happened in the end of the day's trade, it was very interesting. In the last 5 minutes, we have almost 1 million shares of MULN Automotive changing hands. So it was a very high volume close to the session. And as a result, it actually managed to push the stock from being down by about 5% to finishing the session by about 5%. So really interesting. And I'm very curious to know what was going on there. Perhaps it's a sign that there is another big insider making a purchase. Could be some execution of the the stock buyback that's in play. It could be another large investor coming on board. We know that in recent history that there has been a few more significant investors take up a stake in MULN Automotive. Might have seen some of that. Anyway, all very curious. If you got any thoughts on what do you think drove that big jump at the end of the session, share it in the comments below, because I'm really curious to know what made the stock suddenly do a 6-cent turnaround in the space of 5 minutes. Quite curious. And just to continue with that point, the momentum that we saw at the very end of the day does hold up in the aftermarket, with the stock managing to stay up and actually finish a further 1 cent up. So a good positive finish to the Monday. We're still far from where we want the stock to be. We're far from the $1 mark. We're far from the $50 price target that someone came out with over the weekend. But it's a small step in the right direction, I suppose. But who knows? It seems to be whenever MULN comes out with some good news, the stock doesn't necessarily react to how we would like. But for some reason today it did. Now, looking at the news, obviously now that MULN can start delivering vehicles, we will probably see some revenue banked for the end of this quarter, which ends this week, as they will start to deliver vehicles to about $80 million worth of sales that they've already had in the book. Now, for me, what I want to see happen with MULN Automotive now is not so much little developments around what's going on with production, because we're kind of there. That's kind of at a more mature point right now. What I'd like to see is I'd like to see the company start to bank more sales. We have $80 million in sales to start fulfilling, which is great news. But that's only going to take them until maybe early Q1 of 2024 to fulfill. So, the company needs to start getting some announcements around new sales. And obviously, there's going to be like the sales channels of Randy Marion that they're talking about. There's also the potential of a number of partnerships that are being tossed around, some with various airlines. I've also heard the names like FedEx and Amazon thrown into the mix there. So it'd be really good to see if we start to see some, I guess, developments around this front there. The one thing we don't really want to see is we don't want to start to hear now news that there has been an issue with the Class 3 truck and they have to start recalling it. I'm not saying this to be bearish at all, but if you look at other startup EV companies, there has often been an issue with the first vehicles that get delivered, and sometimes they've had to do a recall or at least pay for a little bit of a fix. Hopefully MULN Automotive has dotted their I's and crossed their T's with setting up the manufacturing and testing of the vehicles, and that is not a problem, that we're able to just have a nice smooth sale of these vehicles. But it's one of those things that to be a bit cautious of, but fingers crossed we don't have to worry about that. Anyway, it sets up for an interesting close to the week. Now now that we know we've definitely got EPA approval, we're going to start seeing vehicles delivered this week as per today's PR that the company put out. So what does it mean for the rest of the week? Are we going to start to get any more positive news, or do you think that will be it for MULN Automotive at this stage, and Do we think that Mullen Automotive will come out with any more PR this week, or we'll just let the week, or it'll just be a matter of letting the week close off and the quarter close off, and start fresh with whatever developments they have or whatever PR they have in the pipeline come next week and Q4. Share your thoughts on that in the comments below. Yeah, and where do you see the stock going for the rest of the week now that we do have this confirmation of EPA approval and vehicles starting to be delivered? Is it going to be a continued trend upwards through to the end of the week, or do you think we're going to sort of see that typical, we've hit a little high, time to sell off a bit more now? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Always love to hear from you guys. Till next time, everyone, may the markets trade in your favor. Cheers.